Hello and welcome back to the channel on our continuing voyage to become better blues players. My name's Mark, and in this video we're going to be talking about improvising blues guitar solos in the recording studio environment. Okay, so this is almost the 20th lesson in a long running series that began right at the beginning of improvisation, where never improvised before, don't even know where to start. Where'd you begin? We started right back there, we've built our way up. Almost 20 lessons later, we got to how to improvise a solo in front of a live audience for the first time. In the last lesson, we talked about improvising a full set all night, kind of 2.5 hours of blues improvisation all night. How do you keep that interesting? How do you not just repeat the same old licks every time? All of those kind of things. I gave a lot of loads of tips and ideas and techniques and things to try to make the every guitar solo stand out, even though you're probably improvising over 12-bar blues with every one of them. How do we make them interesting? We talked about lots of different ideas and techniques. If you haven't seen that, I would really recommend you go back and check that out after this one, because a lot of those ideas can be applied in the recording studio as well. You can build intensity in a solo. You can start low, work up high, start slow, get faster. You can, all of those things that we looked about, varying your tone. In the last lesson, I gave a quote of John Mayall when he was in Guitarist magazine in the 90s, talking about going in to record his next album. He said one thing that he does with every album is he makes sure that the songs on the album, everyone is in a different key at a different tempo. That way you don't repeat yourself. You're forced to come up with new stuff. So those kind of ideas, I would definitely, I mentioned in the last video, I would go back, check that out, because they all apply to the recording studio as well. However, the recording studio is a particularly different environment. And in the last lesson, we were talking about playing live in front of an audience, and we talked about its risk versus reward. The risk is it all goes horribly wrong and you embarrass yourself in front of a live audience. The reward is you create a piece of magic which just is there for the moment. You're feeding off the audience, they're feeding off you. It's that one moment of magic and then it's gone. And that's what we're aiming for when we play live. And I talked about techniques for reducing the risk so that you're less likely to mess up in front of an audience and more likely to give the opportunity for it to be that magic. Now, when we're in a recording studio, there's still risk versus reward, but it's a very different risk and a very different reward. The risk, well, there's no risk of embarrassing yourself in front of an audience because there's no audience. You play something wrong, you just stop the tape, rewind and go again. So the risk is different. In a recording studio, time is money. Time is money nowhere as acutely as in the recording studio, because literally as the time is ticking, somebody's picking up the bill, and that somebody is likely to be you and your bandmates. So it's a very different risk. If it goes wrong, if you are trying to improvise a guitar solo and you just can't get into the groove, you just can't get it right, it's just not happening for you, you can end up wasting lots and lots of time, and time is money. And then you feel the pressure, you get frustrated and those kind of things. So we want to look at how we minimize the chances of that happening and mitigate against it. But on the reward side, the reward's very different from playing in front of a live audience because the tape's rolling. So the reward is that you get to create this moment of magic, but then you get to bottle it and you get to keep it, and it's on record for all to see forever. So that's what we're going for. So we've still got our risk versus reward. We want to minimize the risk of it going wrong. We want to maximize the opportunity for it to go right. Okay, so all the things I said in the previous lesson, they still apply about prepare, practice and perform. Talked about playing with confidence, even when you're playing something soft. Playing soft you can still do with confidence. Playing soft doesn't mean playing timid. You can still play with confidence even when you're playing soft. Okay, so we talked about all of that. What makes the recording studio environment very different though is it's a very stale, uninspiring environment. There's not a big crowd who are going to applaud you when you do right. There's usually you, one or two bandmates and the engineer producer. And it's a very stale, creative kind of place because It's rows and rows of rack gear, usually kind of grey or silver. It's very dull. It's a very kind of black and grey environment. Lots of lights flashing. It's very technical. The engineer is not really that concentrating on what you're playing in this magic that you're creating. They're more worried about the sound levels and is the compressor set right and all of those kind of things. So it's not an environment that really inspires creative play. It's, as I say, very stale, very technical environment. You're going to be playing, listening to headphones predominantly. You're not going to be playing with your bandmates, inspiring one another. You're going to be playing to backing track, probably with quite a relentless click going on, and that's what you're playing to. And so all of these things mean that it's not that wonderful creative environment that we're used to. It's something very mechanical and very cold, and it doesn't really inspire a lot of playing. You've got the pressure of the time. Who's paying the bill? If you're getting it wrong and you have to rewind back and you have to do it again and again, you're getting that mounting pressure. So with all of that said, you're probably thinking, why on earth would you want to improvise in a guitar in a recording studio? And to be honest, many people don't. I watched a YouTube video the other day of someone saying how to prepare for going into the recording studio. And he said, whatever you do, do not improvise in the recording studio. It's the last thing you should be doing. You should have everything worked out in advance before, and you're going in and just getting down on tape. Not that it's actually tape anymore, but you know what I mean. Getting down on tape the things that you've already worked out down to the kind of the nth degree. So I can kind of understand that approach. If you've never been in a recording studio before, maybe that's an approach you want to think about, because talking about minimizing that risk, well, you completely remove the risk, but you're also removing that opportunity for that magic to happen. So I was recording my first album I played on with a band, and we did that. We went into the studio, we had everything laid out, and I had all my guitar solos already written. And to be honest, they were I was very young at the time, and so I was trying to impress in that kind of young way that you do when it's your first time and you're trying to throw everything in to try and make it impressive. So even though it was a blues album, I had a little bit of tap here and there, string skipped arpeggios, every scale I could think of under the sun. I was trying to cram everything into every solo. Consequently, it sounds quite mechanical. I go in to record this one guitar solo, and the producer says, I'm just going to warm the tape up, because actually in those days it literally was a reel-to-reel tape. I'm just going to warm the tape up. I'll play the backing track. I'm going to set the equipment up. You just do me a favor, just improvise over it, just get a feel for the chord progression, just familiarize yourself with the song. So I did, and I was improvising, and went through, I think it was twice through the progression. And he turns around and goes, okay, we're done now. And I was like, great, can we record it now? And he said, no, we already did. And I was like, hang on, what do you mean? I thought I was just warming up. I've got this great guitar solo written with all this other stuff going on. And he said, yeah, I know, I've heard it. It's awful. It's too mechanical. It's too stale. There's no emotion. There's no feel. It doesn't flow. It's a bunch of tricks that you're trying to throw in. He said, I recorded it while you were just improvising, because you improvise. He said, this is what he said to me, you improvise far better than you compose. When you improvise, it just flows and it sounds good. So I recorded your 2 improvisations, and I'll take one of those. They were both fine. We're done. It shocked me, but it did stick with me. The idea that actually you can improvise in the studio. You don't have to have everything worked out. So that's kind of, that's something for me that I've then lived with. Every time I've gone in the studio from then on, there's been an element of improvisation. Last album I recorded was the Northbound Acoustic album. Every single guitar solo I recorded was improvised. Every single harmonica solo by Matt, that was improvised as well. Now we knew we were paying the bill. So we made an agreement. This was me, Matt and Pete. Before we went in the studio, we made an agreement. We're going to improvise. The solos are going to be improvised. We're not going to worry about how much time it takes or whatever. We're picking up the bill, and we're paying for an amount of studio time. And if that means we get 10 songs at the end of it, great. If that means we get 3 songs at the end of it, great. Whatever it is, we're not worried. We're going to go in and we're going to improvise, because we know that's what we want. That's what we want to capture. That agreement up front took off the pressure of feeling, oh no, I'm wasting all the time. I improvised every solo, Matt improvised all of his as well. So it's something that I do. I think that's how I play best. I think that's how you get the best out of me. Certainly that's how you get the best out of Matt, the harmonica player. So we did it. So it's something that I would advocate. I would say definitely go in and improvise in the studio. But I understand that it's not for everyone, and there's many reasons why you might think, well, I don't want to. It's not really for me. It's not really for our band. Okay, so let's talk about some specifics now of ways to overcome those challenges and the ways to make sure that we're improvising and creating that magic when we're in the studio. So the first thing I'd say is work with people you like, that you trust, that you're comfortable around. I knew a band when I was younger. They went and recorded their first album, and they worked with a producer who scared the life out of them. He was a very strict kind of headmaster type the producer, engineer. It was his studio. You went in, you did what you told, you recorded when you were told to record, and then you got out and you did what you told. And it was a very, very strict environment. And he got good stuff out of the band, and they did it. They didn't improvise a single note, as far as I know. He had his way of working. I remember talking to them when I was then going to go in the studio myself, and I said, oh, I'm going in the studio, really going to enjoy it. And their faces dropped, go, oh no, we hate it. We hate going in the studio. It's terrible. Because the experience they'd had was this just soul destroying environment. I've always been in, fortunately, with people that I like, that I trust. I like to meet the people I'm going to work with beforehand and make sure I trust them before actually booking a studio time. Feeling that I can be creative around you, because you're exposing your soul when you're improvising guitar solos. You're laying it all out there. You're trying to play with as much emotion as possible. You got to do that with people that you're comfortable, that you're relaxed around. So I'd say that's very important. I would also say don't borrow any special gear. This is a real temptation that people have. They think, oh, my mate's got a vintage Les Paul or something. I'll borrow that and I'll use that. And they come into the studio and they're playing an instrument they're not familiar with. Better to play your own guitar that you are familiar with than some special thing that is unfamiliar to you. Keep all your gear to what you're familiar using yourself all the time. That said, I would say before you go into a recording studio, you've got a guitar, get your guitar set up so it plays as silky smooth as possible, because you don't want to be fighting against your instruments when you've got everything else going on. Practice with headphones, because you're probably going to be playing to headphones. Practice playing to a track, preferably a track with a click. Make sure you can listen to that click and play to it. You don't feel drained or uninspired by it, but actually you feel like you can create around it. Get used to that before you go into the recording studio. One thing I'd say is that you want to be able to play with the right attitude. It's very hard to get into the mindset, so sometimes you have to do some quite artificial things to get into the right mindset to play with the right attitude. I'll give you two very quick stories. First album again that I played on, singer came in, did a thing, and the producer said, yeah, that's fine, but can you give it with a bit more oomph, a bit more guts, give it a bit more emotion? She did it again and just did it exactly the same, and again. And so he then said, do me a favor, we'll try this again later. Go away, change into whatever clothes you would normally use to perform live. And then when you're ready, come back and we'll record. She did, she went away, she got changed, come back. And he set some candles up, I think. He's dressed the studio up slightly differently. And then she came in the stage clothes and gave the performance, the sort of performance she'd give on stage, where she was giving it a bit more attitude and everything. And consequently, we get a great take. Similar story, not too dissimilar, with Northbound. There's a song called The Ballad of Mr. Blues. It's a song I wrote, semi-autobiographical, true story. And it's quite bitter's the wrong word, but it's definitely got some anger to it. We go into the studio, we lay all the track down, and Pete, the singer, goes in to sing the track. And first time through, first take, sings it, note perfect, nails it. And it sounds absolutely pitch perfect all the time and writes everything. And he goes, there you go, I'm done. And I said, Pete, can we do it one more time? And Pete says, like, well, what was wrong with that? Well, there's nothing wrong with it, but I want a bit more oomph. I want a bit more to it. So I said to him, look, we've always got that one to go back to. There's nothing wrong with that. We're keeping that. If we can't do it any better, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. You got it first take, well done. But can we try it another time? But this time, what I want you to do is I want to think in your mind of somebody who's really wound you up or annoyed you or you're angry with. And I want you to point your finger. And when you sing, don't just sing the words on the page, but really point your finger, have them in your mind's eye and sing at them and really spit those words out. He thought I was a little bit balmy, but he said, okay, fine, we'll go with it. He did another take and it sounded miles better. And we listened back and it's like, wow, that's loads better. And Pete says, let's do another one. I think I can do this even more. And he did. And so we did a couple of takes and he really spat those lyrics out and really got into kind of getting into character. And it got the emotion through on the recording. The first one, it was nothing wrong with it. It was just very, flat's the wrong word, but you know what I mean. It lacked that emotion. So you do things like that, wherever it is that you need to do to get into the right mindset to really, you know, play with emotion, whether that's wearing certain clothes that you wear on stage, whether that's getting into a particular mindset, wherever it is, do that. Think about those things. One of the great things that you can do in a recording studio that you can't do live is that you can comp a whole solo together from several improvisations. So you can just do several takes and then go, right, I'll have that lick from there and I'll put it together with this little section from that one and then this from there and that from the other. And if you've kind of played the solo with the same idea, we talked in the last lesson about maybe, you know, starting slow and low and building to high and fast. If you're doing that kind of stuff and you're doing that reasonably consistent on every solo, okay, completely different licks and, you know, new improvisation, but the general theme is the same, then you can do that and you can comp it together. I've done that on plenty of solos and then gone back and gone, actually, but when we comp it all together, there's this one bit that I can't find the right thing for. And so I'll go in and I'll drop a lick just in that space. So that's something else you can do. That's one of the benefits of the recording studio over the live environment. And always kind of have ideas and things to fall back on. Haven't done your practice so you know what licks work really well in there. Okay, so we did talk about risk and reward. The more you practice is obviously the more likely you are to reduce that risk. Having those licks and ideas that you know can work, that's going to reduce the risk. Being able to know that you can comp a solo together is another one. A couple of other things to mention quickly though is when you're playing a guitar solo in a recording studio, one of the big differences between live and in the studio is in the studio it's a fixed length of solo. Your backing band, the track is going to be done except for a gap of 8 bars, 12 bars, 24 bars, whatever it is. You've got a gap and that's where your solo has to fit. It has to start here and it has to end here. When we talked in the last lesson about when you're playing live, you can improvise for as long as you like and then how to count the band back in and bring everybody back in together. In a recording studio, you don't have that. You just have, this is the fixed length of the solo and you have to make it work. You're going to know that before you go into the studio. So be practiced over playing just over a fixed length so you're comfortable doing it. Another thing is if you've got two soloists in the band where you're used to playing off one another, so it might be two guitar players, a guitar player, piano player. In Northbound, it was guitar and harmonica. Me and Matt were very used to, I'll play a lick, now you play a lick, now I play a lick, now you play a lick. And when we play this live, we kind of go round as many times as we felt comfortable. In the studio, we knew we had, it was an 8-bar blues, the song that we did this on. We're going to go round it twice. Okay, so that's the length of time you've got, and you've got to fit it in, and you're not just doing an undetermined length. So we practiced it and we got it right, so we knew what we were doing going in, even though all the licks are improvised. One of the other differences to be aware of when you're doing this though is when we do it live, we're responding to each other's playing. So I'll play a lick, then he'll play a lick, then I'll play a lick, then he will. And when I'm playing mine, I'm listening to what he's just done. I'm doing something different. And then he's listening to what I'm doing and he's responding to that. In a recording studio, you don't get that that luxury, or certainly we didn't in the way we recorded it. I don't know who went first, but basically one person went first and played lick, space, lick, space, lick, space, etc. all the way through, and then the other one went in and literally just dropped in the gaps. So that's a very different approach, but if you can do it, it can work fantastic. Okay, so these are just ideas and techniques and things that I've developed over playing many years in bands and in the studio and things. And if you found this valuable, if you found this entire series from never improvised before all the way through to now record an album, you found that valuable, then please, you can show your appreciation through my PayPal tip jar, or you can consider becoming one of the supporters on Patreon, where you get some additional videos and things as well. So details of both those things are in the description below. I hope you've enjoyed this entire series. We have taken this, this entire journey up. From now on, the lessons are going to be a little bit different. We've done these relatively close together. I mean, at certain points we're doing kind of 2 videos a week. Now we're going to go and change. Next lesson, we're going to go back to looking at some blues songs, some traditional, well-known blues songs, and the lessons are going to flip over to being one every 2 weeks again, with some bonus material on the Patreon site. So I hope you've enjoyed the series. I hope you got something out of it. I hope that in some way it's inspired you to become a better player, that it's improved your improvisation. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed making it. Take care, and I'll see you in the next set of lessons.